Hello there. So in this video, we are going to see how we can actually make use of the functions that we have created so far in the previous videos. So in the previous videos, we have seen how we can declare a function, and we have also seen that how we can define a function. So in this video, we are going to discuss about how we can call a function. Now calling a function means actually using it. So right now what we have done, we have just brought that machine in our home, but we haven't actually started using it. So till the time we don't plug its pin in the switch and just switch on the button, the machine won't start, or we won't be actually using it, right? Similarly, in case of functions, we will have to call that function if you want to use that function. All right, so in this video we are going to see how exactly we can call a function, how we can actually start using the function, because so far we have just declared these functions. So we have declared add function, we have declared add three floats function, and we have also declared print line function. But actually these functions are not getting executed, or they are not getting called. So let me quickly show you that. So let's first let me open a terminal. Let's clear it quickly. All right, now let's quickly compile this code. So let me write g++ file name, that is 01 functions syntax .cpp, and then all right, so it is giving us an error. Okay, so when we are going to execute, or when we are executing this code, it is showing an error. Now what can be the cause of the error? So let's try to understand. So let's try to read this error. So it is saying undefined reference to win main at the rate 16. So it is saying that undefined reference to win main. Now we don't know what is win main, but we know what is main. All right, so from the first program, what we are doing is we are writing a main function. So from the first program, if you remember, any program that we write a main function in it, right? But in this code we haven't written main function. So the compiler is showing an error that your code doesn't contain main function. So does that mean that main function is a compulsory function to have in each and every code if you want to compile it and if you want to execute it? The answer is yes. Main function is one of the important functions in C++. So whenever you are writing any C++ code, you compulsory have to write main function in your code. I am again repeating, in each and every code that you write in C++, you have to write main function, as it is most important function of C++, and main function is called as entry point function in C++. So whenever you write your code and in that code you write multiple functions, the compiler of C++ will start its execution from the main function, and that's the reason it is called as entry point function. So let's say you have three different functions, function 1, function 2 and main function. So what compiler will do? Compiler will search where exactly main function lies in your code, and it will start execution of the code from the body of main function, and that's why it is very important. So we can't skip main function in the code. Now how we can write the main function? To write the main function, we directly define it. We don't write its declaration. Or if you remember, previously in all previous code, we never wrote declaration of main function. So we never wrote something like this, int main. So this is declaration, and then we were defining it. So we never did this thing. We never declared main function. We directly used it, or we directly defined it, right? So this is a slight indication to you. This means that declaring a function is not a compulsion. Okay, so for our add and add three floats function as well, we don't really need declaration. We can skip the declaration. It's not a compulsory to have thing. But declaration is kind of important, and I'm going to tell you in the next video that why declaration is important, and at that time it will be more clear to you that why we should declare a function. But right now just remember this thing, or you are experiencing this thing, that declaration is not compulsory, because we never declared main function. We directly defined it, right? See how we define a main function. Its return type is main, its name is main, and this is compulsory. This name should be main, right, in order to make it as a main function. And then you write its body. So in this way we define main function. We don't need this declaration. Okay, now let's try to compile the code. So let me clear the terminal. Okay, now let's compile the code. So let me write g++ filename.cpp and then let's execute it. You can see that code has got executed, but we are not getting any output. Now why this is happening? Because whatever functions we have created, they are not actually getting used. We have just created them, but we are not calling them, and that's the reason nothing is getting printed on the screen. All right, now let's get quickly started and let's start printing something on the screen. So in the main function, let's say you want to call this function, print line function. You want that function to be executed and you want that function to perform its task. Now what is the task of print line function? Its task is just to print hello world on the screen. In order to print line to print hello world on the screen, we need to call it, right? So how we can call a function? Syntax is very simple. You have to write name of the function followed by parenthesis. So this is the syntax to call any function. You have to write name of the function and in the parenthesis you need to pass it some input. Now in this case the print line function is not taking any input. Okay, so it doesn't require any input. That's why in parenthesis we are not supplying anything. But ideally if a function is taking any input, in that case you will have to supply that input to the function while calling it. So this is the first example of function call where we are calling a kind of function or type of a function which does not take any input. So let's quickly compile and run this code. You can see that hello world is getting printed on the screen. All right, so now the print line function is getting executed, and the reason why it is getting executed is it is getting called. It is getting called from here, right? So if I want to tell you at very high level how the program is executing, so what compiler will do? Compiler will find main function in your program and compiler will start executing the body of main function, and whatever is there in the body of main function, only that part of the program will be executed. Rest of the part of program doesn't even makes any sense until that part of the program had some reference in the main function. Let's say you have print line function. It is a separate function, right? But this function is getting called from the main function. That's why this function will execute. But add and add three floats function, they exist in our code, but they don't make any sense because they are not getting called either directly or indirectly in the main function, and that's the reason they are useless. I mean, at least for now we are not using them, and that's why they are not getting executed. So in order for them to get executed, what we need to do? Again, we need to call them. So let's quickly call this add function. Let's see how we can call this add function. So let's write name of the function, that is add. In parentheses you will have to supply arguments to it, that function. Arguments means parameters or inputs. Okay, so argument is another word for your inputs or parameters or formal parameters. So you need to supply some arguments to the function. So let's say you want addition of 10 and 5. So you will write something like this. You will write add and in bracket you will supply two arguments. So these two arguments are compulsory required because this function needs two arguments in order to perform its action. All right, so we supply two arguments. First argument is 10, second argument is 5. So now what will happen? This function will get called. This 10 will be stored in no1 variable and this 5 will be stored in no2 variable, and then this function is adding no1 and no2 its contents. So this addition will become 15 and it is returning this 15. So now as the output of this function we will get 15. Now this add is returning us 15. We need to display it on the screen. So what we can do? We can directly write cout over here. Something like this. Okay, you can directly write something like this, or you can also do it in this way. Let's say you can write int sum is equal to add, let's say 20 comma 3, and then you can write cout sum is, let's say, sum, where this sum is nothing but a variable that we are creating over here, right? So you can do it in both way. Either you can directly call this function in the cout statement, or you can create a variable, you can catch its return value or its output, you can store it in that variable, and then you can print the content of that variable. So both way it is fine. So if we execute this code, let me clear the terminal again and let's compile and run this code. So let's see what happens. So we are getting output as hello world followed by sum is 23, where we are adding 20 and 3 numbers, and then we are getting output as sum is 15, where we are taking addition of 10 and 5. So it's quite easy. It's very easy to use the function, to call the functions. What we have to do, we just have to write name of the function, and in parenthesis we'll just pass the arguments. Now whenever we pass the arguments in the parenthesis while calling a function, those arguments are called as actual arguments, okay, or they are called as actual parameters, okay. So the arguments that we write in the function definition are called as formal arguments or formal parameters, and the argument that we pass from the function call are called as actual arguments or actual parameters, okay. So I hope you are very clear with this terminology, because maybe in some MCQs maybe they can use such kind of terminologies. That's why you should be aware of this terminology. Now let's pause video over here and let's try to call the third function that we have, that is add three floats. So just try to think how you can call the function, how you can store the result that this function is returning to us, and then just try to print it on the screen. So let me just show you. I hope you're pausing the video and thinking on it. So let me show you how it will work. So we have the function that is add three floats. Now this function will need three inputs, that is three inputs of float type. So let's say I'm passing 10.5 comma 5.8 comma 9.6. okay. Now this function will add these three numbers and it will return us their sum, okay. Now we need to print this sum on the screen. So as we have done in the previous case, we can directly put this call in cout statement. So we can directly write cout, then sum of three floats okay. So you can write something like this, or you can write something like this. You can create a float variable that is with name, let's say sum1, because sum variable name is already used, so you can't use the same name again. Now we have a separate module for scoping and variable scoping. So in that module we are going to discuss how the variable scoping exactly works. So don't worry about that, but right now just remember you can't use same name because sum is already used over here. So here I'm using variable name as sum1, and let's call the function and let's pass some arguments. So let's see 1.1 comma 2.2 comma 3.3. So I'm passing three arguments, right? Three actual arguments, and you can print sum1. So you can write cout sum of three floats is, let's say, sum1, then endl. So this is also fine, okay. So ultimately what you have to remember, this function after getting called and after getting arguments, this function is going to execute its body, whatever is there in the body, and it is going to return us the value. Now what type of value it is returning? Float type value. So that's why we are creating a variable of float type and we are storing that return value in the float type variable, okay. So depending on the function, it will vary that what exactly value it is returning. So in this case it is returning sum of the inputs that we are supplying. Let's say you have a function that is cube function. So that function will return basically whatever number you supply to it, it will return its cube, right? So it will depend on what type of function you are creating.